The community pool at Sunset Hills Country Club was supposed to be my sanctuary that scorching July afternoon in Dallas, a place where I could take my 7-year-old daughter Mia for swimming lessons while trying to escape the suffocating heat that had settled over Texas like a heavy blanket. At 280 pounds squeezed into a size 24 swimsuit that I had ordered online because I was too embarrassed to shop for one in stores, I felt exposed and vulnerable as I settled into a lounge chair under an umbrella, hoping to blend into the background while Mia splashed happily in the shallow end with her instructor. The pool area was crowded with families enjoying their Saturday afternoon, and I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly the other mothers moved in their bikinis and one-pieces, their confidence radiating in a way that I envied desperately. I had always been the bigger girl, even in high school, but marriage to David and the stress of motherhood had pushed my weight to dangerous levels that my doctor had been warning me about for months. David had been a member of this exclusive country club since college, and our membership was one of the few luxuries we maintained, even as our marriage crumbled under the weight of his constant criticism and my growing depression. He worked in finance and was obsessed with appearances, with maintaining the perfect image of success that he believed was essential for his career advancement. Our relationship had deteriorated over the past 2 years, ever since Mia was born and my body had never quite recovered from pregnancy. But I had convinced myself that staying together for our daughter's sake was the right thing to do. The pool had become my escape, because David rarely joined us there, preferring to spend his weekends golfing with clients or attending networking events that I was no longer invited to, because, as he had made painfully clear, I no longer fit the image of the successful wife he needed by his side. The other country club wives were polite but distant, and I suspected that David had said things about me that had influenced their perception of our marriage. That afternoon started like any other, with Mia excitedly running toward the pool while I struggled to keep up. My breathing labored from the short walk from the parking lot to the pool deck. I had just settled into my chair and was applying sunscreen when I heard David's distinctive laugh echoing across the pool area, and my stomach dropped as I realized he had arrived with a group of his colleagues and their wives for what appeared to be an impromptu pool party. He hadn't mentioned anything about coming to the club, and the surprise on his face when he spotted me quickly morphed into something that looked like annoyance mixed with embarrassment. The group he was with included several people I recognized from his office Christmas parties, including his boss's wife Jennifer, a former model who still looked like she could grace magazine covers at 45. I watched as David's entire demeanor changed when he saw me, his shoulders tensing and his smile becoming forced as he realized he would have to acknowledge my presence in front of people whose opinions mattered to his career. What happened next would replay in my mind for months afterward. Each detail burned into my memory with the kind of clarity that only comes from profound humiliation. David approached my chair with his colleagues trailing behind him, and instead of greeting me with even basic courtesy, he launched into what could only be described as a public roasting session designed to establish distance between us and make it clear to his audience that my appearance was as much of a disappointment to him as it obviously was to everyone else. His words cut through the ambient noise of the pool like a knife, loud enough for nearby families to hear, cruel enough to make several people stop their conversations and turn to stare at the spectacle unfolding before them. The shame that washed over me was so intense that I felt physically sick. But what hurt even more than his words was the realization that this wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was calculated, deliberate, and designed to humiliate me in front of people whose respect he valued more than his wife's dignity. The aftermath of that pool humiliation left me sitting in my car in the country club parking lot for nearly an hour, my hands shaking as I tried to process what had just happened while Mia napped in her car seat, exhausted from her swimming lesson and blissfully unaware that her father had just destroyed what remained of her mother's self-esteem in front of half of Dallas's financial elite. The air conditioning couldn't seem to cool the burning shame that radiated from my chest, and I found myself replaying every word David had said, every laugh from his colleagues, every pitying glance from the other pool guests who had witnessed my public degradation. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation itself. It was the dawning realization that this wasn't the first time David had spoken about me this way, that his colleagues' comfortable laughter suggested they had heard similar commentary about his fat wife before Sao, and that I had been the subject of their entertainment for who knows how long. When I finally drove home to our sprawling house in Preston Hollow, the same house that had once represented everything I thought I wanted in life, it felt like a prison, where I was serving a sentence for the crime of not being thin enough, pretty enough, or worthy enough to be David's wife. The house was a monument to his success: 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen that I rarely used for anything more elaborate than heating up frozen dinners, and a master suite that felt more like a hotel room than a place where 2 people who loved each other should sleep. David didn't come home until well after midnight, and when he did, he acted as if nothing had happened, as if publicly humiliating his wife was just another Saturday afternoon activity that didn't warrant discussion or apology. His casual indifference to my pain was almost worse than the original cruelty, because it confirmed that he truly didn't see me as a person whose feelings mattered, but rather as an embarrassing appendage that he was stuck with until he could figure out a way to upgrade. The following Monday morning, I made an appointment with Dr. Sarah Chen, a physician who specialized in weight management and had been recommended by my primary care doctor months earlier, when my blood pressure and cholesterol levels had reached dangerous territory. Sitting in her office, I felt like I was finally admitting defeat, acknowledging that I couldn't handle this problem on my own and needed professional intervention before it literally killed me. Dr. Chen was kind but direct, explaining that at my current weight and with my family history of diabetes and heart disease, I was on a trajectory that would likely lead to serious health complications within the next few years if I didn't make dramatic changes immediately. She outlined a comprehensive program that included nutritional counseling, supervised exercise, and psychological support to address the emotional eating patterns that had contributed to my weight gain over the years. The psychological component turned out to be the most revealing part of the process, as Dr. Martinez, the therapist Dr. Chen referred me to, helped me understand that my relationship with food was inextricably linked to my relationship with David and the emotional abuse I had been enduring for years. I had been using food to cope with feelings of inadequacy, loneliness, and the constant stress of living with someone who made it clear that I was a disappointment to him in every possible way. The weight gain hadn't caused the problems in our marriage. It had been a symptom of those problems, a physical manifestation of the emotional damage that David's treatment had inflicted over time. This revelation was both liberating and terrifying, because it meant that losing weight wouldn't fix my marriage, but it might give me the strength and confidence I needed to finally stand up for myself and demand better treatment. That night, as David snored beside me, completely oblivious to the transformation that was beginning in his wife's mind, I made a promise to myself that would change everything. The first month of my transformation was a brutal awakening to just how disconnected I had become from my own body and how deeply food had been woven into every aspect of my emotional survival. Dr. Chen had started me on a medically supervised program that included meal replacement shakes, carefully portioned whole foods, and a gradual introduction to exercise that began with 20-minute walks around our neighborhood and slowly progressed to sessions at the gym. The physical hunger was manageable compared to the emotional withdrawal I experienced from giving up the comfort eating that had been my primary coping mechanism for years. Every time David made a cutting remark about my appearance or dismissed my opinions during dinner conversations, my instinct was to raid the pantry afterward. But now I had to sit with those feelings instead of numbing them with food, and the raw pain was almost unbearable. David's reaction to my weight loss efforts was predictably unsupportive, ranging from outright sabotage to passive-aggressive commentary designed to undermine my confidence and ensure my failure. He would bring home my favorite desserts and leave them prominently displayed on the kitchen counter, suggest we order pizza for dinner when he knew I was trying to stick to my meal plan, and make jokes about my gym membership being a waste of money since I had never stuck to a diet before. His behavior revealed something I had suspected but never fully acknowledged. He actually preferred me overweight and insecure because it made me easier to control and less likely to question his treatment of me or consider that I might deserve better. The idea that his wife might become attractive and confident enough to have other options terrified him, even though he had spent years complaining about my appearance and making it clear that he found me physically repulsive. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could focus entirely on my own goals without David's constant criticism or the suffocating atmosphere of our home. I started with basic cardio equipment and gradually worked up to strength training with the help of Maria, a personal trainer who specialized in working with people who had significant amounts of weight to lose. Maria understood the psychological challenges that came with major weight loss and helped me develop not just physical strength, but mental resilience, teaching me that every workout was a victory, regardless of how small it might seem. The other gym members, initially intimidating in their athletic wear and obvious fitness, gradually became a source of encouragement as they witnessed my consistency and determination, offering tips and support that I had never experienced in any other area of my life. By the end of the 3rd month, I had lost 42 pounds and dropped 3 dress sizes, but more importantly, I had begun to rediscover parts of myself that had been buried under years of shame and self-doubt. The woman who emerged from those grueling workouts and carefully planned meals was someone I barely recognized. Confident, strong, and unwilling to accept the treatment that the old version of me had endured without question. David noticed the changes, of course, but his response was to increase his efforts to undermine my progress rather than offer support or encouragement. He seemed genuinely threatened by my transformation, as if my success was somehow a reflection of his failure as a husband, and his behavior became increasingly erratic as he realized that his primary method of controlling me was no longer effective. The pool incident that had started this journey began to feel like a blessing in disguise, the catalyst that had finally given me the motivation to save myself from a marriage that was slowly destroying me from the inside out. 6 months after that humiliating day at the country club pool, I had lost 78 pounds and transformed from a size 24 to a size 12. But the most dramatic change wasn't visible in any mirror. It was the steel backbone I had developed and the absolute refusal to tolerate David's abuse any longer. The woman who had once cowered under his criticism now met his attempts at manipulation with calm indifference, and this shift in our dynamic had sent him into a panic that was both satisfying and revealing. He had started paying attention to my appearance for the first time in years, making comments about how good I looked and suggesting we go out to dinner or take weekend trips together. But his sudden interest felt hollow and calculated rather than genuine. The man who had publicly humiliated me for being fat was now trying to win back a wife he had never truly valued, and the irony wasn't lost on me that he only found me attractive, now that I looked like someone he wouldn't be embarrassed to be seen with. My transformation had not gone unnoticed by others in our social circle, and the reactions ranged from genuine admiration to barely concealed jealousy from women who had previously dismissed me as David's frumpy wife. At charity events and country club functions, I found myself receiving compliments and attention that had been completely absent when I was heavier, a stark reminder of how superficial many of these relationships had always been. The wives who had once looked through me as if I were invisible now wanted to know my secrets, asking about my diet and exercise routine with the kind of intensity usually reserved for discussing stock tips or real estate investments. Even more telling was the change in how the men in David's professional circle treated me. Suddenly I was worth talking to, worth including in conversations, worth treating as if I had something valuable to contribute beyond being someone's wife. David's colleagues, the same ones who had laughed at his cruel jokes about my weight just months earlier, now made comments about how lucky he was to have such a beautiful wife, how he must be working hard to keep me happy, and how I looked better than women half my age. The shift in their behavior was both gratifying and disgusting, confirming that their respect had always been conditional on my appearance rather than my character or intelligence. David basked in their compliments, as if he had somehow been responsible for my transformation, taking credit for my hard work and discipline while conveniently forgetting the years of sabotage and emotional abuse that had contributed to my weight gain in the first place. His newfound pride in my appearance felt like another form of objectification, reducing me to a trophy that enhanced his image, rather than recognizing me as a person who had accomplished something remarkable through sheer determination and willpower. The most significant change, however, was in my relationship with Mia, who had watched her mother transform not just physically, but emotionally over the past 6 months. She had started asking questions about why Daddy was being nicer to Mommy lately, and whether people were supposed to be mean to each other when they were married. Questions that broke my heart but also strengthened my resolve to show her what healthy relationships should look like. I had begun documenting David's behavior more carefully, keeping a journal of his verbal abuse, and taking photos of the emotional eating triggers he would leave around the house, building a case that I knew I would eventually need. The woman who had been too ashamed to defend herself at that pool was now methodically planning her escape from a marriage that had nearly destroyed her. And David had no idea that his cruelty had created the very strength that would ultimately be his downfall. 9 months after my transformation began, I had reached my goal weight of 145 pounds, having lost a total of 135 pounds. But more importantly, I had gained something infinitely more valuable: the unshakable confidence to execute a plan that would give David a taste of his own medicine in the most public and humiliating way possible. The annual Sunset Hills Country Club Charity Gala was approaching, the same event where David had spent years making excuses for why I couldn't attend or insisting I stay home because my presence would be embarrassing for his career. This year, however, I had every intention of attending, and I had been meticulously planning an entrance that would not only showcase my dramatic transformation, but also expose David's true character to the very people whose opinions he valued most. The irony that this revenge would take place at the same country club where he had humiliated me was not lost on me. It felt like poetic justice that the scene of my greatest shame would become the stage for his downfall. My preparation for the gala had been as methodical as my weight loss journey, involving everything from hiring a personal stylist to selecting the perfect dress that would maximize the impact of my transformation. I had chosen a stunning emerald green gown that hugged my new figure in all the right places, professional hair and makeup that enhanced my features without looking overdone, and jewelry that David had given me during happier times in our marriage. A subtle reminder of the woman he had once claimed to love before I became an embarrassment to him. The dress alone had cost more than I typically spent on clothes in 6 months, but I considered it an investment in my future happiness and David's very public comeuppance. I had also been working with Dr. Martinez to prepare mentally for what I was about to do, ensuring that my motivation came from a place of self-empowerment rather than petty revenge, though I couldn't deny that the prospect of watching David squirm was deeply satisfying. The weeks leading up to the gala had been filled with David's increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative of our marriage and his growing anxiety about my transformation and its potential impact on his carefully cultivated image. He had started suggesting that we renew our vows, take a second honeymoon, or even have another child, all transparent attempts to bind me more tightly to him, now that I had become the kind of wife he could be proud of in public. His sudden romantic gestures felt like too little, too late, especially since they were clearly motivated by fear of losing his newly attractive wife, rather than any genuine remorse for years of emotional abuse. I played along with his renewed attention, allowing him to believe that his charm offensive was working, while secretly documenting every interaction for the divorce proceedings I had already begun planning with Rebecca Martinez, the best family law attorney in Dallas. The night before the gala, as I hung my dress in the closet and laid out my accessories, I felt a calm sense of anticipation that surprised me with its intensity. The woman who had once been too ashamed to defend herself was about to orchestrate a public reckoning that would expose David's cruelty to everyone who mattered in his professional and social circles. I had invited my sister Rachel to attend as my guest, ostensibly to celebrate my transformation, but actually to serve as a witness to what I was about to do, and to provide moral support when David inevitably tried to gaslight me about the events of the evening. Tomorrow night, the man who had publicly humiliated me for being fat would discover that karma, like weight loss, requires patience and planning. But the results are always worth the wait. The night of the charity gala arrived with the kind of perfect weather that seemed designed for dramatic moments. And as I stood in front of my bedroom mirror putting the finishing touches on my makeup, I barely recognized the confident woman staring back at me. The emerald green gown fit like it had been designed specifically for my transformed body, and the professional styling had enhanced features that had been hidden under excess weight for so many years that I had forgotten they existed. David was getting ready in his walk-in closet, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife was about to orchestrate the most public humiliation of his life at an event where his professional reputation and social standing would be on full display. He had been unusually attentive all week, clearly proud to finally have a wife he wouldn't be embarrassed to show off to his colleagues and clients. but his newfound appreciation felt like validation of everything I had suspected about his shallow, appearance-obsessed character. The drive to the country club was filled with David's excited chatter about the evening ahead, his obvious pride in my transformation, and his detailed explanations of which clients and colleagues would be attending and how important it was for his career that we make a good impression together. He kept reaching over to touch my hand or comment on how beautiful I looked, gestures that would have meant everything to me a year ago, but now felt hollow and manipulative. The man who had spent years making me feel worthless was now treating me like a prized possession, and his inability to see the irony in this behavior only strengthened my resolve to follow through with my plan. As we pulled into the country club parking lot, the same lot where I had sat crying in my car after his pool humiliation, I felt a surge of anticipation that was both thrilling and terrifying. The ballroom was decorated with elegant floral arrangements and soft lighting that created the perfect atmosphere for what was about to unfold. And as we made our entrance, I could see heads turning and conversations pausing as people recognized me and tried to reconcile this confident, stunning woman with the overweight insecure wife they remembered from previous events. David was in his element, basking in the attention and compliments about my transformation, as if he had somehow been responsible for my success, introducing me to colleagues and clients with a pride that felt both genuine and completely unearned. The same people who had witnessed or heard about his cruel treatment of me were now congratulating him on having such a beautiful wife, and I watched him accept their praise with the kind of smugness that made my skin crawl. My sister Rachel arrived fashionably late, looking stunning in a black cocktail dress that complemented my emerald gown perfectly, and her presence gave me the final boost of confidence I needed to execute my plan. She had been my closest confidant throughout my transformation and divorce planning, and having her there as a witness to what was about to happen felt like having a guardian angel by my side. As the evening progressed and David became more relaxed and confident, surrounded by colleagues who were impressed by his wife's dramatic transformation, I began positioning myself for the moment that would change everything. The charity auction was about to begin, and I had arranged for a very special surprise that would give David exactly what he deserved in front of everyone who mattered to him. The charity auction portion of the evening began with the usual array of luxury items and vacation packages, but I had arranged for a very special addition to the lineup that would serve as the centerpiece of my revenge plan. Working with the event organizers, I had donated a transformation package that included personal training sessions, nutritional counseling, and spa treatments, ostensibly to help raise money for the charity while celebrating my own weight loss journey. What David didn't know was that I had also arranged for the auctioneer to share the story behind my donation, including details about the public humiliation that had motivated my transformation, and the husband who had spent years undermining my self-esteem before suddenly becoming proud of me only after I lost weight. The irony of using a charity auction to expose his character was perfect, because it would be impossible for him to object or cause a scene without looking even worse in front of his colleagues and clients. When the auctioneer introduced my donation package, the room fell silent as he began telling the story of a woman who had been publicly humiliated by her husband for her weight, who had found the strength to transform herself despite his sabotage and emotional abuse, and who was now using her experience to help other women find their own strength and confidence. The details were specific enough that anyone who knew us would immediately understand that he was talking about David and me, but presented in a way that positioned me as an inspiration and him as the villain of the story. I watched David's face cycle through confusion, recognition, horror, and finally panic, as he realized that his cruelest moment was being broadcast to a room full of people whose respect and approval he desperately needed for his career advancement. The bidding for my transformation package was enthusiastic, with several women in the audience clearly inspired by the story and eager to support both the charity and my message of empowerment. As the price climbed higher and higher, David's discomfort became increasingly obvious to everyone around us, and I could see his colleagues exchanging glances and whispering among themselves as they processed what they had just learned about his treatment of his wife. His boss's wife, Jennifer, the former model who had been present at the pool incident, was bidding aggressively on the package, and her participation felt like vindication for every moment of shame I had endured that day. The final bid of $15,000 came from Jennifer herself. And as she won the auction, she looked directly at me with an expression of solidarity and support that spoke volumes about how the women in the room viewed David's behavior. The aftermath of the auction announcement was swift and devastating for David's carefully constructed image. Colleagues who had been congratulating him on my transformation just hours earlier were now viewing him with obvious disgust and disappointment, and I could see him trying desperately to do damage control through forced smiles and nervous laughter that fooled no one. The man who had built his career on appearances and networking had just been exposed as an emotional abuser in front of everyone who mattered to his professional success, and the beautiful wife he had been so proud to show off had orchestrated his downfall with the same methodical planning she had used to lose 135 pounds. The evening was far from over, but David's reputation was already in ruins, and the best part was that he had no one to blame but himself. The drive home from the charity gala was conducted in complete silence, with David gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white while I sat beside him, feeling a sense of calm satisfaction that I hadn't experienced in years. The man who had spent our entire marriage controlling every aspect of our social interactions had just watched his carefully cultivated reputation crumble in real time, and there was nothing he could do to undo the damage that had been done in front of his colleagues, clients, and the country club elite whose approval he had always craved. His phone had been buzzing constantly throughout the remainder of the evening, with what I assumed were damage control conversations, but the expressions on people's faces as we left the gala made it clear that his professional and social standing had been irreparably damaged by the revelation of his true character. The following weeks brought a cascade of consequences that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations for how my revenge would unfold. David's boss called him into a meeting on Monday morning to discuss the unfortunate situation that had developed over the weekend, and while he wasn't immediately fired, it became clear that his prospects for advancement at the firm had been permanently damaged by the public exposure of his abusive behavior. Several of his biggest clients requested to be transferred to other account managers, citing concerns about working with someone who had demonstrated such poor character in his personal life. And his colleagues began treating him with the kind of professional courtesy that barely concealed their personal disgust. The country club social circle that had once embraced him now viewed him as a pariah, and invitations to networking events and social gatherings dried up almost immediately as word spread about what had happened at the gala. Jennifer, who had won the transformation package at the auction, became an unexpected ally in my journey toward independence and healing. She reached out to me the week after the gala to express her admiration for my courage and to share her own experiences with an emotionally abusive first marriage that had ended in divorce 15 years earlier. Through Jennifer, I was introduced to a network of successful women who had overcome similar challenges, and this support system proved invaluable as I navigated the final stages of my divorce proceedings and began building a new life for myself and Mia. The transformation package that had served as the vehicle for David's public humiliation also became the foundation for a small business I started, offering coaching and support to women who wanted to reclaim their lives and health after leaving abusive relationships. 6 months after the gala, my divorce was finalized with a settlement that reflected both David's desperate desire to avoid further public scrutiny and his lawyer's recognition that his behavior had made him an unsympathetic defendant. I received the house, primary custody of Mia, and enough financial support to ensure our security while I built my new business. David moved into a small apartment across town and began what his lawyer euphemistically called reputation rehabilitation. But the damage to his professional and social standing proved to be permanent. The man who had once held all the power in our relationship had been reduced to a cautionary tale about the consequences of emotional abuse, while I had emerged as an inspiration to women who had previously felt trapped in similar situations. The pool incident that had started this journey now felt like the best thing that had ever happened to me, because it had finally given me the motivation to save myself and show David that karma, like weight loss, requires patience and planning, but the results are always worth the wait.